Welcome to the Veterinary Rehabilitation Podcast, where we aim to help fellow veterinary rehab therapists increase their knowledge and elevate their practice. I'm Megan Kelly.
And I'm Anae Lloyd. Together, we bring you the latest insights, research, and information in the field of veterinary rehabilitation.
This podcast is brought to you by Onlinepethealth, a leading continuing education membership for veterinary rehabilitation therapists. With Onlinepethealth, you'll have access to a wide range of online resources to help you stay up to date with the latest techniques, advances, and trends in the industry.
Our podcast features in-depth conversations with leading experts in veterinary rehabilitation. They share their own experiences and knowledge to help you improve your practice. Whether you're a seasoned pro or just starting out in the field, our goal is to provide you with the tools and the insights you need to succeed.
So join us as we explore the exciting world of veterinary rehabilitation and help you take your practice to the next level. Hey Vetrehabbers, this episode is a special revisit of one of our business basic sessions in our Online Pet Health membership. We're joined by Helen Nicholson. She is the author of Networking for Introverts. And we dive into a topic so many Vetrehabbers quietly struggle with, and that is networking. So if you've ever felt like you're not good at it, this conversation is going to shift everything. Helen shares practical tips, strategies, and pointers for anyone who finds traditional networking draining or slightly uncomfortable. And the best part is she explains why introverts often have a natural advantage when it comes to connection and how the skills of great networkers can actually be learned, developed, and made to fit your personality. So if you go to conferences and you avoid networking, you doubt your strengths, this episode will give you reassurance, some practical tools, and a completely new perspective on connection and networking. If you're looking to update your continuing education, we've got 3 flexible ways you can learn with us at Online Pet Health. You can join for free, so sign up to one of our free webinars in our free limited access membership. All you need to do is head over to onlinepethealth.com/free. You can purchase webinar access, so buy access to scheduled webinars and enjoy the webinar recordings for 4 weeks at your convenience. And the best one, become a member. So choose from our different membership levels to unlock full access to all the live webinars, a library of over 600 recorded webinars, business basics training, and regular research updates. Okay, a quick word from our sponsors before we dive into today's topic. At Paw Prosper, we believe true pet well-being demands a 3-pronged approach: prevention, support, and rehabilitation. Our brands are trusted by veterinarians, universities, and rehab facilities alike. So whether you're looking to train, rehabilitate, or help your patients age gracefully, our brands Walking Pets, Help 'em Up, Respond Animal Therapeutics, Fit Paws, Muffins, Halo, Sleepy Pod, and Canine Cards offer effective, innovative, and proven solutions. You can sign up today to receive a one-time special gift, and that's for all our podcast listeners with your next order. Just have to go to pawprosper.com/OPH. All right, over to my chat with Helen. Hey Vetrehabbers, I'm really excited today to be chatting to Helen Nicholson. She is the author of the best-selling book, Networking for Introverts. Now, in our world of vet rehab, like referrals and word of mouth, they are everything to us. And if you want to get referrals, you actually have to network. Like when we go to things like CPD events or conferences, but for some of us, striking up these conversations and building relationships doesn't come naturally. And if I think about it, a lot of us got into the field of treating animals because we were hoping that we didn't have to deal with people, right? So we didn't know that these would be important skills. So today we're going to pick Helen's brain, and she's going to give us some strategies, how to network effectively, even if you're an introvert. Helen, thank you so much for joining me.
Wonderful to be here.
Helen, won't you just introduce yourself and just tell the audience exactly like how you got into this sort of passion about introverts?
So my name is Helen, and it is my first networking tip. If you want to remember people's names, you need to say their name 3 times in a conversation. Because one of the reasons why we forget people's names is we only say it once, and that doesn't create the stickiness in your brain. But I'm actually an ex-accountant. So I also did not get into this, deliberately or naturally. It actually evolved. So I think, and I also grew up in a house where my parents were not natural networkers or connectors. My parents didn't know people who knew people. But what I realized later on, probably in my 20s, 30s, is that when you know people who know people, you can sort out most of life's problems. And I also realized that it could be a learned skill. So you may naturally be good at it, but then I actually noticed that some very successful people that I knew were doing certain things differently. And I watched them and I observed, and their value systems aligned with mine. And I actually realized that when you connect and you become a connector in a network, it actually gives you a lot of satisfaction. And so I started a leadership training business called The Networking Company, funny that, and we specialize in teaching mainly people in the corporate world on how to network. And, we mainly have introverts that come on our leadership training programs, a lot of people in the financial services world. And I'd always had a hunch that introverts were actually better networkers than extroverts. Because if you look at two of the fundamental networking skills is listening and following up. And introverts naturally are much better at both of those skills. And I speak as an extrovert because extroverts often talk about themselves a lot and they get excited by the interaction, but then they don't follow up. And those are two key skills. So after COVID, I went on a research project. I interviewed 253 introverts and I put kind of that theory to the test. And I did some focus groups, and I actually found out that introverts are in fact better networkers than extroverts and that if is a capital if they lean into their natural strengths and they actually unleash certain superpowers, which they actually already have and often think of them as weaknesses when in actual fact they are huge strengths. And that was the reason why I wanted to write the book, because I wanted to give introverts confidence and competence on how to leverage the skill so they can improve their lives and their careers.
Before we carry on, can we just define what an introvert is and how you would know you were one?
So I think a lot of people think introverts are shy, and that is not actually the case. Introverts and extroverts, the definition of the two is where you get your energy from. So extroverts typically will derive energy from people, whereas introverts derive energy from being alone. And really that is the definition. It's got nothing to do with being shy or not speaking a lot. It really is it's just where you get your energy from. That really is the definition. And interestingly, 73% of the world's population are ambiverts. So in other words, people play between introversion and extroversion, and it can, for example, depend on your job. For example, if I'm a natural extrovert and yet I've had a very social week and I've been to a lot of functions, then I find then on the weekend I need a quiet weekend because I actually need to recharge. And also, I think COVID has played a big role in this. People have become more extrovert or introverted in the world since COVID. And I also think there's a natural predisposition as we get older to become more introverted. So, those things all play into the fact that the world has probably, if you compare us to where we are now in 2025 to where we were in 2019, I think there are a bigger number of introverts now than there were kind of 6 years ago.
So let's say like we go to a CPD event as a Vetrehabber and there may be one or two or three people and the rest are just all these other like vets and specialists and like people that are a little bit scary
Yes.
because you feel like maybe you don't know as much as them and you go there and you're thinking, I'm just gonna hide in the corner. Like I'm just gonna listen, but I'm not gonna hide in the corner. So like that would be an introvert. An extrovert would be somebody who would be like, yeah, I'm gonna go and chat to all these people, and it doesn't matter that they're like more clever or I think they're more clever than me and they know so much. I'm just gonna like be a sponge and just get whatever.
So I think good networking actually starts to happen before the function takes place. So what I've observed is, first of all, arrive early. The best networking always happens right at the beginning of an event or at the end. Typically an event when it's in full swing, even for extroverts, can be very intimidating to walk into a room where there are 100 people that are all busy chatting. So if you know that, crowds like that can be intimidating, then arrive early, because then there'll be another few early birds there, and then that's where you start conversations. So arriving early is a big one. The second thing is to lean into your natural strengths and also do some research, because introverts are often got very good analytical brains. And, you know, to look at the guest list, if the event will share it with you beforehand, and you know, do some research. Who are the people that you need to chat to? One of the introverts I interviewed for the book, who is an exceptionally good entrepreneur, and she is a big self-confessed introvert. She uses pink glasses. And so she says that she'll get the guest list before an event or at a conference, and then she knows that there are these people she needs to target, and she wears pink glasses, and she pops them an email beforehand, and she goes, I'm the person that's going to be wearing the pink glasses. And she said it's amazing that creates a pull effect. You know, because then people see and they go, oh, you know, there's already a familiarity. So if you can use something that you wear, you know, that I'm the person wearing the red jacket or whatever it is, if that is what you're comfortable doing. So it's the arriving early, researching beforehand. And then there's the rule of 3. I always say to, you know, and we can discuss the neuroscience just now, but introverts have got low social batteries. So I think you've done a very good job if you go to an event and you meet 3 people. And as soon as you've done that and you've gotten their details, you can follow up, you know, afterwards, then you can go home. So, you know, the faster you get out of the starting gate and meet your 3 people, then you can leave after 45 minutes. You know, you don't have to stay for the whole event, because a lot of introverts said to me, they run out of social battery, you know, halfway through an event, and then they feel bad. But I said, as long as you've met your 3 people, then you can go home.
Yeah. I love how you say like researching and actually going there with intention.
Yes.
Because if I
Yes.
think, okay, so I'm an extrovert, but if I think about myself, I have gone to some conferences where I've had certain people that I've wanted to meet, but it's just sort of been in the back of my head, if you know what I mean. I thought, well, if I bump into them, that's great. But for people that are really introverted, like they really need to like nail it down. They say, okay,
Yes.
like
Yes.
these are the vets that are in my area. I need to try and get them and speak to them before my social battery, you know, expires, basically.
Mm. And the thing is that if you research someone well, you know, and this is where social media plays such a great role, because you can already know quite a bit about them, you know, just by going onto their LinkedIn profile, seeing what their socials say, because then you can start to know what their interests are. Because the biggest objective and the best listening talking ratio is 60% listening and 40% talking. And that's why introverts already have a superpower around that, because they naturally are curious and they want to know things about that person. So it's very easy then to get the conversation going if you've done the appropriate research.
Yeah, because then extroverts are just talking, right?
Yeah, they're talking from the hip and often talking about themselves, which
Yeah,
you know is not you're not going to learn anything if you're talking about yourself the whole time.
yeah. So, I mean, I think one of the things that I think when I think about someone who's introverted, and you know, I have a lot of one-on-ones with vet rehab therapists, and a lot of the things that I help with is marketing their practice and how to get more vet referrals. And one of the things they really struggle with is confidence. What advice could you give to these veterinarians? And I'm guessing this, you know, most extroverts have confidence, and maybe I'm wrong, but if I think about it, they're generally confident type of people. And I'm guessing that a lot of these are introverts that just lack this confidence, and they really struggle to self-promote when they go and they speak to these people. Is there any advice that you can give around that?
So I think what I've observed is we are more in touch with our weaknesses than we are with our strengths generally. And this goes across the board as people. You know, I see this as delegates on our leadership programs all the time. You know, if I had to say to everyone listening to this podcast right now, list your top 5 strengths right here, right now. What are the top 5 things that you think you are exceptional at? A lot of people will have difficulty answering that question. If I asked, what are your top 5 weaknesses? Everyone will be able to answer them just like that. And therein lies the problem, because when you know what your strengths are and you package your value around that, you know, and I'll use an example. You know, I'm a mother of twins, and I decided, you know, quite early on what my personal brand was going to be as a mother. I realized that I couldn't do everything. I was a single mom as well. And so I decided I was honing into what I was good at. I knew I was a voracious reader. So I read to my girls every night. I knew I was not the tuck shop mom. So I wasn't the, my children now will still tell you that the best meal I made them was scrambled eggs. That was not where I put my energy and effort. I taught them about business. I taught them how to network. I taught them how to be an entrepreneur. I taught them how to look after their money, and I taught them how to look after their skin. So those were the things I know that I'm interested and that I'm hopefully good at, because I've been doing it for 55 years. And then I shared that knowledge with them. Instead of often as mothers or, parents, I think we try and be all things to all people. And that would be my biggest, piece of advice to the vet rehab people who are listening to this. Decide what your 5 strengths are. Go and do a Gallup Strengths Finder. You can find them online. I highly recommend it. I think it's a crucial skill that everyone in the world should do. And know what your strengths are, and then start to package your value. And I'm very happy if people email me afterwards. I've got a whole lot of personal branding worksheets that people can do to really hone in on this unique ability. What makes you unique? Because when you really focus in on that, and I do think it's part of our life's work. I don't think you know that when you're 30. I think it evolves. I really believe that's one of the purposes we were put on this planet to uncover. So it's not an instant thing. But when you uncover that, then I think it leads to a natural confidence, because you just suddenly start to feel like I'm doing the work that I was born to do. And then there is a natural confidence that flows from that.
So when you talk about the personal branding, let's just talk about from a vet rehab perspective. So would this be like their branding as a professional? So who they see themselves, and would this be you gave examples of you as a mom, would it be advisable for them to define where their strengths are in the profession? What type of therapists they are, what type of cases, so that when they go now to a vet and they're talking about them, that's what they're going to concentrate on, because that's what they're going to be comfortable talking about.
Yes, I think it's a combination of both. I don't, and I think it causes a lot of people a lot of stress when they try and isolate their brand into little boxes. The more congruent and consistent your brand is. Like, for example, if I ask people to describe me in one word, whether it's my clients, my colleagues, my friends, or my family, a word authentic will come up. I'm real. The Helen you get, on a stage speaking, or the Helen you get, as a friend or as a parent, is there's congruency there. So, but what is your secret sauce? I think that's what they need to come up with. What makes, so you could be a vet rehab person and the person next to you does exactly that same job, but there's your secret sauce, and it's a combination of your personality, it's your strengths, it's your your specialities. What makes your eyes shine? For example, I used to train a lot of people, and then I realized that I don't like the training, I like the speaking. So I could have put that as an umbrella skill that I can communicate well, but I had to go into it in more detail. Whereas I realized that the speaking is more my vibe than the sitting and doing workshops for a day. And it took me probably I was really 45 before I actually realized that. So I think it's really almost going on an excavation, and sometimes asking other people for feedback, because other people often see your zone of genius before you do, because for some people it's so part of who you are that you don't think it's difficult. And it's only when someone says to you, wow, Meg, you do that in 4 hours and it takes me like 4 days to do that, and you're so good at that. So I would encourage people to get some feedback. If they're going on a personal branding journey, then first of all, do some self-reflection on your strengths, your personality. What would you be happy to be perceived as? What is the brand PTYU look like? Just like if we say Woolworths, you think of quality. Like if I say your name, Meg Kelly, what's the word that you want people to, because that's effectively your brand. And I would do some reflection on that, and then I would go and get some feedback from people. And probably the truth lies somewhere between how you see yourself and then how other people see you.
Yeah, love that. And I mean, the people that you're going to get feedback from are like colleagues and potentially even
Yes, a real mixed bag. And also get it, I always say 6 people, like choose a family member, choose a friend, choose a colleague, choose someone who you used to work with, choose maybe a client, choose a wide variety of people and say to them, if you had to describe me in one word, what would that word be? And you can even do it via WhatsApp. Just do a quick 360-degree personal branding exercise. And I do it every year with kind of some of my stakeholders, and choose people, obviously, whose opinions you trust.
Yeah. Can you give any like icebreakers? Like when you're like in one of these events and you just don't know how to approach the person and what to say. Like, yeah, any tips about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a whole chapter in the book on small talk, because the reality is a lot of people are not good at small talk and they don't like it. But the reality is small talk leads to big talk. And it's the way in which we engage as human beings. So first of all, there's the resource element that I spoke about. So if you targeted, and I know, for example, Meg, that your daughters do horse riding because I've seen on socials, then I would know that's something I could just ask you about. But if, for example, you're going in there cold and you don't know anyone, there's a technique called OAR, OAR. So I always say to people, think of rowing when you arrive at an event. Observe, ask, reveal. So you observe something. So you say, gee, isn't it freezing in Cape Town today? I take such big strain in winter, whatever it is. Then you ask them a question. How long have you been in practice for? The fact you probably all have veterinary science as, part of your interests, especially if it's a CPD event. And then you reveal something about yourself. And the R is the secret sauce of the equation. Is you reveal something about yourself that opens up the conversation. So something like, I haven't been to a face-to-face event for ages, and I was really nervous about coming here. And but I'm here and I'm making the most of it now. So you reveal something about yourself that can almost, and I use humor a lot in that, but you've got to find what works for you. But you reveal something about that just opens up the conversation, something that you're nervous, you're excited, you describe a feeling that you're feeling, and then you find that the conversation gets going. Women unconsciously will often do this to each other around, say, for example, I arrive at an event and I'll see, oh, you've got a beautiful outfit. So I've observed that. Where did you get it from? Oh, I'm having a bad hair day. But then you've got to follow it up with something more meaningful. And you've got to, so sometimes you need to do a few OARs to get the conversation going.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great tip. How does it differ if you're at an online event? So like, are there any different tips that you would give if sometimes we go to these online events and you're just watching and you're not necessarily networking, but then sometimes they put you into these rooms. Is that a better place for an introvert? Do they feel more comfortable? Or are they also feeling, uncomfortable behind the camera? Because I mean, this is strange. Like for me, when I go to these things and I'm there and my camera's up, I actually prefer to put my camera off than for people to be constantly watching me. And I'm actually an extrovert, but maybe those are my introvert moments. So yeah, I'd love to get your feedback about that. And then if you've got any tips and advice for people just in general, whether you're extrovert or introvert, because online is a whole different game.
Yeah, I mean, I feel quite passionately about this, and our corporate delegates will know that I say never, ever, ever go onto an online meeting with your cameras off, because one of the issues with branding is that we're very visual creatures. So 70% of your memory about a person will be about what they look like and what they sounded like. So imagine if you take 70% of your memory away, you're only left with what that person actually says. And sometimes they may not have an opportunity to contribute, especially if it's a big group of people. So I always say to people, first of all, what you do is you're sending out a message to the other people. I take my personal brand seriously, because I don't want to be a no-name brand, because otherwise you become invisible. You run the risk of becoming the Zoom or the MS Team icon, just with your initials on them. And I always say that's not the person who gets the recognition that they deserve. So visibility is a big issue. Both introverts and extroverts, in my experience, have struggled with online, and introverts especially, because introverts notice the non-verbals a lot more than extroverts do. It came up a lot in my research. They'll notice, that Meg, you are looking sad today, or they'll notice that your body language looks different. And they'll often be the one afterwards, they'll come to you and say, are you okay? But whereas online takes away a lot of those non-verbal cues. So it's something that they battle with. One of the things that came up, and it relates to the neuroscience, is a lot of introverts said to me, they think of the clever thing to say when the meeting is already finished. And, often if it was a face-to-face meeting on the way, in the car on the way home, then they think, oh, I should have said that. And on an online meeting, when the meeting's already ended. And the reason for that is there's something happens in our brain. It's a bit like a pinball machine. So I don't know if you ever played, old style, arcade style pinball, like the ball would go ding, 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 ding. And basically what happens to both introverts and extroverts, a stimulus arrives in our ear, and then it pings around. And for extroverts, the stimulus arrives and it goes ding, 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 ding through our brain. And then they instantly will often respond. And that's why extroverts are seen as quick thinkers and quick talkers and quick responders. Introverts, the stimulus will arrive in their brain, and then it takes longer. It goes like ding, 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 ding. So, and that sometimes can take hours. But what is interesting, and why a lot of introverts have been buying my book and then giving it to their extrovert colleagues or bosses, because they're saying, understand me. Because often that's why if you've got an introvert colleague, it's very important to go back, revisit topics again, because often because that process took longer in their brain, often their contribution is actually more valuable than the quick thinking extrovert who didn't really think much about the thing and just, gave their first thought. So I think that there's a superpower in that. But introverts need to realize it. And the way they can circumvent that is to give a meeting or an event pre-thought. So before you go onto an online session or into a meeting, think, okay, well, you know what the agenda is, and kind of what the discussion. So prepare your thoughts beforehand, because otherwise then you just, you can never go into a meeting or an online session and say nothing. You need to contribute. And that's why introverts are often overlooked for promotions for exactly this reason. Because they're having that clever thought, after that.
Yeah, later. So you got to get the pinging started before the meeting so that the pinging stops.
Yes, exactly.
Love it. Yeah, so I mean, obviously, like we have online, we have like in person, and we've chatted now about awe. So, like, if you want to try and make the small talk, we chatted about the rule of three. So, try and see if you can speak to three people. And we chatted about also preparing. So, sort of knowing who you want to speak to. What comes afterwards? So, like, with networking, sometimes people just do whatever is at the event, but it's the things that come afterwards, actually, the follow-up, that's actually the most important, because that actually solidifies that connection and connects you long term.
So one of the biggest networking principles is that open palm. So thinking, what can I give, not what can I get? And if you go into every interaction thinking you want to offer value, that's the mindset of the most successful connectors. People who so I always say, you've got to imagine all your relationships as bank accounts. You always want to have them in the green. You never want to be an overdraft. So you always want to offer more value than what you extract from your relationships. And if you keep that principle in mind, it's definitely a true north in terms of how you navigate your network. So for example, you meet three people at a conference, and if you've been strategic and those three people are important for you to keep connection with, you've got to find out what they're interested in, find out what their problems are, what's keeping them up at night. That really is the objective of your conversation, once you've gone through the small talk. And then, to build a relationship and think, when I reach out to them, to say, I found this piece of research that I think would help you with this issue. And then, can I share it with you? So first of all, link in with them, and then you offer value. And sometimes you have to offer value, 4 or 5 times. It's not a thing to keep track of. But in other words, you've got to offer value. And then at some stage, there'll be an opportunity to have a lunch or a coffee, because introverts generally are much more comfortable one coffee or lunch at a time. So, often they don't like the big events, but they do have to do them occasionally. So like a conference or a CPD event. And then I always say my challenge is to have a coffee with a new person once a week. Because if you do that, and deliberately, and you're inviting people out for coffee, even if it's a virtual coffee, it doesn't have to be face to face. But then you find that you're expanding your network all the time, and then you're having a keeping in touch strategy, which is all around adding value to them.
Yeah, I think what people often underestimate is when you make connections, even though you're researching and you're thinking, I must go speak to that person because you think there maybe is something that ties you, the two of you together, or you think, well, maybe I can help them with this, they can help me with that. Sometimes when we're making these connections, the help and the bond that you create only actually comes like 2 years later. I mean, how
Yes.
often I feel like I have met somebody and I've, in not necessarily actively trying to network with that person. It just so happened. And maybe in the beginning, like I've been able to help them. And
Yes.
initially, I'll think to myself, well, I can't really see how this person is going to help me, but I'm happy to help them because
Mm,
I'm a helper. I'm that kind of person.
mm, mm,
And then it's always amazing to me. It's like somehow, 2 years down the line or something, that person spoke to somebody that spoke to somebody that gives you some opportunity that you would
mm,
never have had. And because you'd helped that person, and there's that reciprocity.
mm, mm,
So I love how you explain it. Like never go in thinking that what can I get from this person? So don't be only isolating yourself and thinking, okay, I've got my people which I can get stuff from. Those are the three people I'm going to meet. You must also remember all the other people. And for me especially, I think in the vet rehab world, a lot of the connections and really meaningful connections and a lot of referrals have come from our relationships actually with the receptionists and
yes.
the vet
Yes.
nurses and you call them the little people, but they're not. You know what I mean? But the
No.
people that
No.
actually are not actually the decision makers.
Mm,
They're the influencers. And they're the ones who remember you. And
yes.
then when that vet is like, oh, I've got this case, I don't know what to do with it, they say, oh, well, you should speak to that vet rehab therapist. Doesn't she do all these things? I'm sure she can help. And they're the
Mm.
ones that, will remember. So yeah, it's interesting for me, as you're talking, that we must remember there's loads of different people that can help. It's not only the vets that we're looking at as vet rehab therapists.
No, I mean, I will often say to people, we've discussed abundance, that open palm, but the second biggest skill of good networking is curiosity, is being curious about people. And it goes from being curious about who your barista is that you get your coffee from every morning, who the security guard in the building, who the receptionist is, and paying and being curious about them and finding out, like, tell me about your life, and remembering their names and remembering details about them. There's a wonderful story about Bill Clinton, which a 702 journalist told me many years ago when he visited South Africa. And she said she wasn't a Bill Clinton fan because I think there'd just been that whole scandal about
Mm,
him. And she
I
said
remember.
he walked into a function, and she said there was a woman standing next to her who he'd last met 6 years previously on a trip to South Africa. And this woman is not famous. And he said he walked up to her. He remembered the woman's name. He remembered what her child's name was, a little boy, and he remembered that he played baseball. And she said she cannot. She said she'd never seen anything like it. And apparently, if you read any of Bill Clinton's biographies, there's a lot of research around this. He would make notes.
Mm.
He'd have index cards, and he'd write, Meg Kelly, daughters, horse riding, husband Graham, that he'd do the whole thing. And that's what made him, because he immediately was apparently the charisma and personality that he had. And it was just that little detail, of just remembering those things about people that, when they're not the obvious influencer, to your point.
Yeah. I actually, when I had my vet practice, I had a little book actually that I had in my
Mm,
car.
mm,
And if I went into a vet practice, I would like say like red hair, receptionist, name of the
mm,
person. We had a conversation about their dog. I would write it in there. And so each vet practice, I had like people that were in there. And then the
mm,
next time I had to go in to drop pamphlets or anything, I'd quickly read through. And then I would say to the receptionist if she was that one, like, how's your dog doing? Is your dog better or whatever. I don't think I was like Clinton in that I could remember all these things. I mean,
yeah,
mine was in the book. So yeah, that's a good tip. You talk about him remembering names. Like that's one of the things that I really struggle with. And I'm actually really bad at remembering faces too. So I don't remember faces well or names, but you give me a dog and I will remember. I'll see the dog. I will remember its name, its condition, its everything. But
Amazing. But it does
people,
show that you're in the right industry, Meg.
yeah, but the problem was often like I would see the owner in like the shopping center or something,
Yeah.
and like it'd be vaguely familiar, and I'd like just need to know what the dog's name is, and
Mm.
like then I'm good, you know. But you know, so and I couldn't connect the two, so I couldn't connect the owner and the dog. But if I literally saw the dog, I knew what the dog was, everything about it. So you mentioned like saying the name 3 times.
Mm.
Like, how would you do that? Like, so do you just keep repeating
No,
another
so
question and
when I
asking the
meet
name? And,
you, yeah,
yeah,
then I'd say, Meg, great to meet you. And then during my conversation with you, I'll mention your name. And at the end, I'll say, Meg, I'll send you that LinkedIn request or whatever it is. But you've got to say it 3 times. But I think in that circumstance where you're trying to almost connect a dog and an owner, then one of the ways to associate the two is to imagine their heads above each other. So if I look at you, then I've got to see the dog's head above you. And when I look at the dog, I've got to see your head above the dog, and
yeah.
that's a way to, get that association going.
I used to say the dog's name and the person's surname. So
Mm,
I would remember the
that's a good
dog's
one.
name is like Fluffy Jones.
Mm,
So
mm,
then Mrs. Jones,
mm,
Fluffy, try and make that connection. That was the
okay,
way that I did it, but I
mm.
was successful. I don't know. Helen, where can rehab therapists learn more about like networking and all of this from you?
So they can go onto our the networking company .co.za is where our company there are a lot of resources there for them to have a look at, or they can go to my personal website. It's Helen-Nicholson NICHOLSON.com, and they can order my book there, or it's on Amazon. It's also on Audible now, which is quite exciting, and it's available on Takealot. So yeah, any of those places.
Awesome. We'll put all the links either below the video or in the show notes of the podcast. Helen, thank you so much. It's been amazing chatting to you, and I've learned so much. I've taken a whole lot of notes, and I'm going to be intentional, and I'm going to use or. I'm going to say the names 3 times, and I'm going to do the rule of 3, and I'm going to follow up. So thank you for all of that.
Well, I always say to people, it's networking, not net sitting around. It doesn't, thing is, I think it's something that we've realized it actually is an asset that you've got to intentionally work at, like you would work on the strategy of your business. And there's a networking audit tool that they can actually download. There's a QR code in the book, which is a very useful tool to see where the gaps are in your current network.
Yes. Awesome. Thanks so much, Helen. Lovely chatting to you.
Amazing. Thanks, Meg. Bye, everyone.
Okay, bye.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please hit the subscribe button so you get notified every time I load a new podcast. I'm here every week talking to vet rehab therapists from all over the world about all things vet rehab. A big thanks to our sponsor, Paul Prosper. Their sponsorship allows us to be able to give this podcast to you for free, so please go and check them out, paulprosper.com. Don't forget to bookmark the next Vet Rehab Summit. It's on Saturday, the 31st of October, 2026. Come and be a part of the world's largest online veterinary rehabilitation conference created specifically for you, the vet rehabber community. Online Pet Health members get VIP complimentary access to the Vet Rehab Summit. For more information about continuing education for vet rehabbers, you can go to onlinepethealth.com. And if you want access to our free membership, we update the webinars in this area every 3 months. You can sign up at onlinepethealth.com/free.